We're back with more NBA coverage, and in this one, I'll be covering the finale of all the games in the first round of the 2025-26 NBA playoffs. Of course, they say the two greatest words in sports are Game 7, and we, as fans of the specific teams or the general league as a whole, were given not one, not two, but three over the course of the entire weekend, all having their own implications in regards to how the rest of the playoffs would be shaped up for some of these rosters. And in varying ways, it delivered for some. Naturally, others were going to be left in a bit of a bind, trying to wrap their heads around what just happened, depending on the result they faced by the conclusion of their respective series. So, to get straight into it from there, and start out with the 76ers and the Celtics in this one. They could not have envisioned themselves in this spot. But best believe that the Philly fans and the 76ers as a whole were more than determined to accomplish the job here. They were fully armed for one of the few times they ever really have been in terms of this roster. Stories surrounding them is how unhealthy Maxey, Embiid, and George have been as a big three since they acquired him in the offseason in 2024. Now, they were back unexpectedly with Embiid returning from his appendicitis injury and subsequent surgery and putting together, aside from his debut game in the playoffs, some pretty solid performances to keep this team rounded. Of course, Edgecombe as well is not a player that you can forget too much about either. Bringing on that reliability for him to be a rookie and still slide down into being a very good option when all of these other guys aren't necessarily performing at the highest levels, and just bringing the energy that this 76ers team needs to ultimately take control of this series. And as for Boston, similar situation. They had higher expectations with Jason Tatum coming back from injury towards the tail end of the year. In regards to that, they'd be dealt a terrible blow, as it would be mentioned that due to knee soreness in his right knee, Jason Tatum was going to be out for this game. And with the way that you'd been performing up to this point, you felt that a duo of them, Brown and Tatum that is, could get the job done in a Game 7. Although in the previous two games after being up 3-1, there had been a bit of inefficiency and inability to close this series out in the way that you would have intended. I am not one to speculate as to, the severity of his specific injury, but with a player just coming off of this stuff, you want to take that as seriously as you can. And so it would all be on Jaylen Brown and other individuals. He would lean on Ron Harper, Baylor Shireman, and also Luka Garza, giving them another start and actually deploying a lineup consisting of a pair of them and not played together throughout the entire regular season. Those kinds of situations are tough, but anything could happen on any given night. And it would have to swing in that sort of direction from an unexpected source in order for the Celtics to stay alive. Because they're down. You don't have much of another choice here. So we get into it from there. And one of the biggest things that stood out to me wasn't even a basketball thing, although the 76ers did get right out to a 9-0 lead, because you had, I guess it was the team doctor, ripping the ball away from Embiid or trying to keep it, and then you had a fan also try to get up and engage in the situation as well. I'm like, dude, I understand it's a Game 7 in Boston. You're a fan. What the hell are you getting involved in something like this for? I'm not particularly sure. Right then and right there, they got a delay of game penalty pretty early in this one. And you consider the fact that they were already starting to swell up the scoreboard here after VJ Edgecombe made this jump shot. Something that, again, people would say, oh, he was going to struggle within the league. No, they came fairly easy for him in this one. But all you're doing on the sideline with whatever antics are going on there is just making the situation worse. It's like Mazzulla can speak for himself and he knows how to do his job. He doesn't need some random individual trying to step into the middle of things and cause chaos. There's no need for that shit. Team has a job to do. You do not need to be involved in it. Sit down in the courtside seat and shut the fuck up. Like, it's as simple as that. It would just continue to get worse after that point because eventually the 76ers, through really just taking physical advantage of this roster, as there would be a few times where Joel Embiid would draw mismatches, and you'd also have Kelly Oubre Jr. on several occasions over the course of this 17-6 run to start out the game. Like, bruh, I'm telling you, like, because it was Garza starting this game, and whether it was him or Keita in at any one point in time, dude, they're just standing in the paint like this, and you have Kelly Oubre Jr. in the dunkier spot. And consistently, they just found the hole to exploit and get him the basketball in his hands for him to either get up a dunk or put up an easy shot at the rim uncontested by drawing these centers out. They were just dazed and confused. Like, it's literally traveling behind them every time, and they have nothing that they can do about it. At a point, sure, there are sneaky ways to incorporate that kind of play. At the same time, you're telling me you're not adjusting to this at all, and they've beaten you with that move several times to start this game. That did not bode well for Boston here. But they would try, and they'd start to answer back just a little bit with some of their guys coming out and creating plays and shots for themselves. Of course, Brown himself on a short 7-2 run started to understand the assignment a little bit, getting to the free throw line on a couple of occasions and ultimately trying to accrue free points that way. Still, the 76ers would hold an ultimate advantage here because for everything that we've said about the Celtics' wings this season, they and the bigs would get into early foul trouble, especially Neemias Queta. It was interesting. They showed a graphic around this time, too, that he was averaging 4 fouls a game in this series while keeping it to just 2.8 in the regular season. And they put themselves at a little bit of a detriment as well. Apparently, Joe Mazzulla also decided to just DNP Nikola Vucevic in this game. I was thinking, hey, this guy's hurt and he's just not going to play. Okay, no, he dead-ass sat him down. And maybe he has his own reasons for that, if that makes any sense. Especially considering the offensive weapon that Joel Embiid is. You're probably not expecting Nikola Vucevic to match up well with it. And chances are, over the past few games, he's seen, hey, he hasn't been, so you know what, we're just going to let him rest now. We're going to trust some of our younger guys to go in and get the job done. And he wouldn't be remiss to do that with what I've said about Queta this season. Like, he's played relatively well. This series has just not been kind to him. And I don't really know what it is, but the discipline just had to be completely improved on his end. And in none of these games, really, he was able to figure it out. Like, he still would put together some solid offensive production for this team and give them somewhat of a presence on the glass, but it doesn't mean anything if you just can't stay in the game as a result of piling up on all those foul calls that early. It never really helps you out. The 76ers will hold the 32-19 advantage at the end of the first quarter, and then we get into the second where Derek White, who had also, on offense especially, really been ineffective for most of this series. In fact, the previous 6 games in this didn't really contribute much on the offensive side of things. Even in the games that they won to go up with the 3-1 record, after Game 4. He starts to catch fire in the second quarter especially. And the 76ers, as a result of him finding his rhythm and also getting it out to other players, for them to start adding to the tally here, they started to have this lead shorten up just a little bit. And there were even times where the Celtics were able to take a lead in this one. It was a 16-2 stretch of action by them, along with Peyton Pritchard as well, getting pretty creative with some of his finishes as well. Like, yes, he's the smallest player on the court, so he had to use it to his advantage on one of these finishes, essentially ducking under Joel Embiid for a very contested finish still. Even though he got him on his back hip, this is still Joel Embiid we're talking about, breathing down his neck. But you got to find a way. And that's what these Game 7s are always going to test in a player. You have to find a way when all else fails to still find a way to come through and make the necessary plays needed to win ball games, or contribute to the little things to factor into the entire equation. That's what it always boils down to. And so the Celtics getting within one at a point after the first half of the second quarter, they were most certainly in the battle. And I could definitely tell you, it was a much better showing for them in the second quarter, with them putting up 31 points of their own overall compared to the first quarter. They needed that kind of energy if they wanted to compete, and they knew that. Early on as well, like, the contain inside the paint was pretty solid for the 76ers, but then it became a point of, hey, okay, now we're starting to impose our own stretch of dominance here, and we're putting more pressure on them to commit to those drives. Once that happened, everything else came fairly easily for this team. Then Joel Embiid started to, do the Joel Embiid thing. Say what you want about him. Oh, he flops a lot. Oh, he is a troll in every sense of the word. The man was most certainly getting his touches and converting on them at several points towards the tail end of the second quarter. And that's just how they do it all the time. It's not going to change about Joel Embiid. And again, he's going to find a lot of those touches in the hot post, and he's going to try to draw out the entire thing. He will take as long as he needs to, because he should trust himself after a point. This is a man who was a scoring champion in the NBA. He would naturally trust himself to get these shots up. And on occasion, he was able to, especially, again, against some smaller defenders. That's what it got to at a point, because, again, Kata was already in foul trouble. Then Luka Garza came in, could not handle Joel Embiid all that much himself. He was also in foul trouble at a point in this game. So it's now a matter of you having smaller matchups on him. Baylor Shireman, for example, was able to hold his own against Embiid a few times, especially in the first quarter. But after a while, it was like Joel Embiid, and you're going to put a 6'9" small forward on him. No. They tried Hugo Gonzalez at a point, and as good of a defender as he is, he's not going to last with Joel Embiid here. So those little things right there continue to work to the 76ers' advantage. With that being said, it didn't do too much, because aside from Tyrese Maxey making this jump shot near the end of the first half, this was still much closer for the Celtics, as this ended up going into halftime with a 55-50 advantage to Philly. They had to find a way to make the proper adjustments to win in the second half. Keep in mind, this is a team with potential championship expectations, having most of their guys back. you can make the excuse and that Jason Tatum would most certainly help them get over the hump here. I'm sure that's a given. This is the same man in Jason Tatum who I believe in the 2024 series that they had against the Celtics, or against the 76ers rather, en route to their NBA Finals, this motherfucker had 50 in a closeout game. So he can't, and that's going to be a recurring theme as well. He would most certainly like to play in this game. And as they went on, as they were panning the camera over, you could read it on his face. I'm sure he wanted to be out there and play with them. But, hey, I mean, at the end of the day, this Boston team had still done this much with Jaylen Brown, leading the show. So he needed to activate that in the second half as well. It was going to take him making those kinds of things happen in order to get the job done here. And, 2023 series. Okay. Just didn't want to mix that up. But yeah, Jason Tatum has that experience in those moments, and that would most certainly help you. Just, you still have to find a way to overcome all that. Those obstacles are going to happen. They're not going to be controlled always. You still got to push through it. Man. Essentially, in the second half of this game, I just saw a team continuously settling. I'd already mentioned how they got deeper and deeper into foul trouble amongst their centers. So for most of this time, they had to play smaller. Advantage Embiid. Do you know just how much the offense essentially ran through him? Especially in the third quarter. I mean, mostly every single touch, it's like, hey, yeah, we'll get some of our other guys activated too, which they did a much better job of doing. Because Maxey and Edgecombe were still able to flourish in their own roles. And Paul George was still turning back the clock in his own regard. Hitting some tough fadeaway shots, putting up some timely threes of his own. Being another solid option for this team. Even if he wouldn't be considered the secondary piece, and more so the third, occasionally fourth, depending on how you'd want to interchange that with Edgecombe. That was crucial for this 76ers team. And you felt that as this third quarter went along. Even when the Celtics were able to contest shots like this one, like Tyrese Maxey just completely activated the blinders on him. Didn't feel fazed by anything that they were throwing out there at them. Because they knew in most ways they had the overall matchup edge against this team. And it made things a whole lot easier for the 76ers, even if they weren't completely blowing the Celtics out of the water, to get a full head of steam. Like, a lot of the runs here were relatively short in nature. So it's not like they were just completely pulling away the whole time. Yet, at every point when it felt like the Celtics had an opportunity to match their production, they just could not. They couldn't after a while. Like at the 5-minute and 30-second mark, essentially, as I was looking at the graphic they put up, they showed that the Celtics were 9 of 31 shooting from deep. Now, again, we know the story with this team. You're going to live by the three. You're going to die by the three. I understand that. And there were some pretty open looks that they just were not hitting. Including Baylor Shireman, once more, just struggling to get the corner shot down. You get in those kinds of slumps and you want to break out of them. You want to be the dictating force in breaking out of them. So shooters shoot, right? in the third quarter, it could be helpful and beneficial to try to work towards that momentum heading into the fourth quarter. To repeatedly settle for these shots, though, instead of trying to get your guys in close. Create opportunities for Luka Garza when he was in the game, or Nehemiah Skata when he was in the game, to do damage on the offensive glass and take advantage of the 76ers team that way. You're just, again, spacing out and bailing out the 76ers by not having them overcomplicate their thinking. And that really messed the Celtics up by the end of this game. That wouldn't even be the worst of it. Although the struggles got them trailing by as much as 16 points in this quarter, they did have at least one reliable weapon from range, and that was Sam Hauser. Like at nearly every critical point, it was he who, up until, as we get out of the third quarter now, they're holding a 13-point lead, you have Sam Hauser come right out and contribute a pair of big-time shots to pull this team back closer to taking the lead in this one. And he had, up to this point in time, remained perfect from three-point shooting. The entire rest of the team was struggling, and not Sam Hauser, who just will randomly in these games show up for some of the bigger shots out there and make sure that he places his own kind of impact on the game, regardless of what it may look like to other casual watchers. It just makes no sense. But they very much valued that. Right after that point, they put a last resort of effort into this. They cut the lead down to 6 after Jaylen Brown finally made it a point to start getting his way downhill and forcing contact. Although, about that. For now, they cut it down to 6. And then you just had a lot of craziness going from here. I mean, like, Brown and Embiid were going back and forth with each other in regards to matching up against each other on occasion, and then having just the weirdest sequence of calls and non-calls take place. And mind you, this is still a game that Jaylen Brown would eventually bring within a single point. But Paul George was going through some shit as well, trying to deal with Jaylen Brown. Because while this and one was fair game, there would be some shit taking place later that just made absolutely no sense to me. I'm not going to lie to you. Like, we're still competitive, and granted, Derek White also continued to have a pretty solid game, pulling them back within one at around 5 minutes left. Dude, like, Kata at this point was still contributing to some decent looks on offense, but he himself, after fouling Tyrese Maxey, would be very much in danger. And then just complete and total chaos. I did not know what the absolute fuck was going on. Like, there was a play here where Jaylen Brown just, as I'm watching this live, he trucks the absolute... He literally puts his whole arm out, extends it fully out. That is the criteria of the foul call. Pushes Paul George all the way back. And gets away with it for some odd reason. Embiid got his calls as well in some of the weirder ways, which is typical I suppose. But I just, like, stuff like that is crazy. Because, literally, like, huh? We're calling one, and we're just going to completely avoid calling the other. Then Jaylen Brown had some called on him as well and decided to get a little salty about it, if you will. Now, that being said, good defense was still being played, and the Celtics were still so close. You get in the clutch time, and this is still, with all that in mind, a 1-point ball game. They made things, and as I was kind of saying as well, you had to make things much tighter overall. You could not give up open looks and live to tell the tale that way. No, you had to make everything difficult on pretty much every single shot, every single look, every single rebound. Nothing could be yielded so freely in a situation like this, with the final 5 minutes of your season on the line. Joel Embiid, once more, just got himself in weird situations, fouling people or drawing contact, which would benefit both teams as they were both in the bonus at this point. Then, with all of that, and through all of those struggles, combined with just a lack of shot making from Boston, the 76ers were able to go on a very short but important spurt with Tyrese Maxey just using his speed to his advantage, drawing the collapse from big men and even having other defenders on multiple occasions trail behind him just to try to stop his motion. He is one of the quickest players in the league with the ball in his hands. And he proved that down the stretch, literally accounting for 8 of the next 10 points, including 4 scores on 4 of his own possessions here, to take an even greater lead for the 76ers team. And the last one was just a demoralizer. Like, he's scrambling around these screens, trying to find an open space in angled exploit, and they still give it up to him, despite what looks like good defense. And at that point, as he just puts it off his right hand on the left side of the backboard, that was just kind of the final nail in the coffin, if you will. The Celtics still could not hit a shot, and they again lost this. Would go on to lose this, rather. 109-100. Meaning that this Celtics team, with championship expectations on the line, got first rounded and lost a series in which they were leading with a 3-1 record. Stunning, to say the least. Man, goodness gracious. That's wild. Even more historical significance here, it would be the first win for the 76ers all time when trailing 3-1. And it would be the first time in 33 tries for the Celtics losing a series in which they led 3-1. How you like them apples? The curse of the Doc Rivers era of basketball with the 76ers and those blown 3-1 leads was gone. They'd done it. They'd overcome those past trials. They'd overcome all the injuries that they'd suffered throughout the regular season. And they still put themselves in winning position. That's something truly special. And, you know, with that, they'd mentioned that Embiid won his first Game 7 as a result of this as well. Just, hey, man. Like, you have to give respect to that. And I will in a second. it's much fairer for me to just approach the Celtics first, considering that they lost this. I mean, as I tracked it myself, dude, like, they, again, yes, that is their identity as a team. And it got them a championship. They missed 9 straight 3-point shots in like the final 5 minutes of the game. 9 straight. And don't get me wrong, they did attempt some shots from in close, including one where Jaylen Brown literally pushed off so badly on Tyrese Maxey that he actually pushed him into Joel Embiid and proceeded to have him collapse to the ground, hobbling back on offense, with the man already dealing with an injury. The shot itself, they let it go, and Jaylen Brown missed that one. He had several opportunities from range, from the mid-range, to take this team over the top, and he proceeded not to, despite putting up elite effort on defense. The entire team went cold from 3-point range. And once that happened, it seemed like that was all that they had to offer after a while, which makes no sense to me. They'd been doing this all regular season. They have shown that they can win these kinds of games all regular season. And you proceed to drop the next 3 in some of the same ways with the same fundamental issues taking place. As well, they have the championship experience, and they suffer this kind of loss. It's very revealing, to say the least. Like, yeah, you can look at this, and people have cited this on multiple occasions. Ron Harper Jr., Luka Garza, and Baylor Shireman went scoreless as starters. Sure, yet there's still no real excuse here. Not really. You've proven that you could win games without Jason Tatum on so many occasions before he came back. You have displayed this already. And yes, the stakes are going to be higher here. You're telling me that no one else can answer the call effectively enough? That's the problem. Like, the Celtics at the end of the day, this is a damning loss. It is not something that I think would really just cause them to go in a different direction as a team completely. Because to be fair, as long as they are fully healthy, they've always got a chance to be a championship caliber squad. That much has been established already. You just have a lot of different pieces to work around with. And I don't know for sure if everybody would come back. Those are some tough decisions that they're going to have to end up making in this offseason. And of course, they want to continue to stay under the second apron. So you're going to have to be wise about the moves you choose to make here. That's really what's going to determine how they look at this. Do they view this as a one-off occurrence? Do they settle in this moment banking on the talent that they already have and just trying to see them through a full season as a fully intact roster to then gauge, hey, next offseason, are we entitled, are we obligated to keep all of these players here? Or do they play it by some perspective of a future outlook and just try to determine whether or not some of these players are fit to remain as key pieces of this roster? They have a lot of wings, a lot of young, promising wings to look to. Are they feeling it enough to where they want to pair up Tatum and Brown with somebody else? Maybe a genuine point guard to have as a starter. Maybe another big man in there who is younger. Keita himself has proven that, and so he may end up staying. The fact that Vucevic, to my knowledge later, he could not play in this series. He could not play in this game because Missoula did not trust his defense. You, as a roster, don't want to leave any room for doubt in regards to what you're building. And although this Celtics team does have the top end talent, those kinds of small discrepancies, those small problems in their roster ended up coming back to bite them completely in the last 3 games of the series. So do you take more stock into that if you're the front office, or do you look at it as, hey, we just need another full season of work, we'll be good and back to that status as a team in no time? We'll have to see from there. Derek White in this game had 26 points and 6 rebounds on 9 of 26 shooting, with 5 threes. Not a very efficient game, but also the best he had. And consistently when he was out there, he was at least trying to make some noise, trying to get this team on the right track. It just did not materialize. Jaylen Brown as well in the closeout game had 33 points and 9 rebounds with 4 assists and 3 blocks on 12 of 27 shooting with 3 threes. Also not necessarily efficient. And this man as well, apparently he wanted to complain about the flopping and stuff like that. And yes, Embiid, again, did get his own suspicious calls here. Like I said, citing a few of those examples, the amount of times that they missed calls on Jaylen Brown's ass, and he got away with literal crime here. Those, by comparison, are just as bad as the things that he himself on his Twitch stream tried to cite. Even if he wasn't flopping the whole time, like, you are drawing the most illegal contact by definition for these foul calls. And you're going out of your way to do so on several occasions in the fourth quarter with the game on the line, but they let you play through it. Then, when it is called, it becomes an issue. They let so much slide. And that's where the superstar whistle thing comes in. That's where the difference between the regular season and the playoffs comes in. When it's not anything too crazy, for the most part, they're going to let it play on in the postseason. They encouraged it. So that's a given. You're surprised at some of the things you went out of your way to do, including like a separate push on Joel Embiid, and then one that he also faced. In those situations, they're very right to call those fouls. You can't be surprised at that. And you can't call out Embiid for that, knowing that in ways you had the opportunity to benefit and just didn't. And I think as well, again, without watching the stream, but seeing something about it recently, saying that, hey, the refs over the past 3 games need to be investigated. Brother, you gave yourself their record all time after trailing or after leading 3-1 for the Celtics franchise is now 32-1 as a result of this series, as I mentioned. Why is it that the last 3 crews from the last 3 games need to be investigated? And those just so happen to be the last 3 games in which you lost to lose this entire series. Maybe it's just about, I don't know, playing better as a team, executing far more efficiently on the court as a team. Making sure that your defense is as tight-knit as possible. Especially not so much in this game later, but with you literally getting blown out in ways over in game 6, I should say. Shit like that cannot happen. Those things are within your control. You simply did not do your job. You can't then express saltiness at external factors because of your inability to go out there and perform when you needed to with the series on the line. It's not something that I expected from the Celtics, I'll admit. But at a point, knowing that this is the status you have as a team, you'd best close the series out. And they failed to do that on all levels. So to try to shift that blame on an entire referee crew is insane to me. Absolutely insane. You did something that has never been done in Celtics franchise history, and in a negative way. Brown is entitled to think what he wants, but that just makes no sense. And especially with other people hearing that and then seeing the game in real time, watching what the hell happened and didn't happen in regards to these foul calls in the fourth quarter, especially surrounding Jaylen Brown. How can you fix your face to say that in a live mediated setting? And man, it's just wild. Like, Brown is very aware of what he's doing at this point. He's very aware. So to just say that is so strange to me. Like I said, Tatum most certainly wanted to play in this game. I don't think there's any doubt about it. You could see it. Like, they panned over to him for a final shot. And he was just like, man, I know he wanted to get out there. I'm not sure, because it was made so close to the time of the game as well. Like, that news came out on Sunday, because as Missoula said in the presser, like, they checked him in the morning and they tried to see if he was all good to go, and that's when the decision was made. So it definitely took them a little while to come up with the idea of, hey, we're not going to have our franchise guy or our A-B option, depending on how you want to frame it. We're not going to have him play in this game because we think that he is going to have a chance at re-aggravating something. And we don't want to put him in that situation. They could be very well inclined to have made that decision. It's just, hey, when you're in their setting, having come off of NBA Finals in 2024, then you take a bit of a step back with an injury that you can't control from Jason Tatum in 2025 in the second round, and then you take another step back with another Tatum injury that you can't control in this season. With the investment that they've made in Jason Tatum, yeah, you are certainly not doubting his ability to continue performing for this organization. And regardless of what people want to say with this Tatum injury popping up, the dude is still one of the more durable players in the NBA since he's been in the league. I know that there can be such a thing as revisionist history when you take those injuries into account, but no. Before the Achilles injury, he'd rarely, if at all, miss time in the NBA with those kinds of problems. So I don't think that the Celtics are just going to be sitting, watching this and thinking to themselves, oh, hey, did we invest too much in Jason Tatum? Did we do way too much in regards to paying him as early as we did? They're not regretting that for a second. Although with the amount between him and Jaylen Brown, it does limit the rest of your team. They're not regretting that because that is the market and that's how it's increased with the salary cap and the media deals consistently increasing the cap limit for each and every single team. So it was inevitable that a contract like that was coming at some point. If not then later. That could pose a whole another set of problems. But like I said, do you want to put somebody else besides those two who can efficiently step in if needed and go get the job done? You could think that would be coming from Derek White, and it just was not a great series for him. Not at all. Like 11.1 points per game on 32% shooting from the field and 27.3% shooting from deep. Like, it was not an objectively good series for Derek White. And while Peyton Pritchard tried, again, once they started to figure him out as a defense over the last couple games, he was rendered really ineffective. So at that point, again, who else? That is where, you'd start to think to yourself that they'd have a little bit of regret about not keeping Anthony Simons, although they were hell-bent on not paying the man in the offseason. So, of course, they let him walk. Is there another kind of player out there like that they'd be looking for? I don't know. We'll just have to see in time. So, a bit of I guess it wasn't the result that they were expecting. The fact that they were still in the dance, if at all, shows that even in a weaker state as a roster, they still have the talent to pull it off. Again, are they willing to make the trade-off to elevate themselves from being that team that is just happy to be there, knowing that they want more and greater for themselves, and that they have accomplished that before. They know what it feels like, and they want to taste that again. And then for the 76ers, just a solid performance all around. Joel Embiid had 34 points, 12 rebounds, and 6 assists on 12 of 26 shooting with a three-pointer. Tyrese Maxey had 30 points, 11 rebounds, and 7 assists as well. And VJ Edgecombe had 23 points and 6 rebounds along with 4 assists. Although this game was a bit quieter for Paul George in the department, again, he went 5 of 10 from the field, and he had 3 three-pointers as well. And in the series overall, he was a 17.4 points per game contributor on 48.9% shooting and 55% shooting from deep. Pretty much the best mark amongst all players on the team. And no, I'm not fucking counting Andre Drummond in that equation. In terms of the minimum amount of three-pointers you'd actually have to have here, it was Paul George who topped down everybody else. So again, a great series for him in that department. And it makes things pretty interesting for the 76ers. You consider the injuries that they've gone through this season, especially to Joel Embiid, a player that without, they typically struggle to win ball games in the first place when he's not out there. And here they are, anyways, advancing to the second round of the playoffs. It's just completely interesting, to say the least. I don't think I had it on my bingo card, but it does show you what they can do when they are assembled as a full unit. And it's not like Embiid, again, he came in pretty late to this series. He did not play this full thing. And early on, as I'd mentioned in the recaps, he did not look as effective as you'd like, yet he still found a way to get back to reasonable form and serve as a low-key X factor in this series. Even Mazzulla, at a point in this press conference, said that, hey, what changed? Joel Embiid. A player who they were trying to crack the code on, and they just struggled to really solve the problem when it came to countering his offense. So adding that in now for Philadelphia, it gave them a massive boost in regards to winning this entire series. And now they get to take that momentum into a pretty familiar setting against the Knicks, who they actually will face off against in the second round of this playoff run on the Eastern Conference side of things. The first game is tonight at 8. And that series, if you remember, is actually a rematch from the 2024 first round series that went 6 games, with Embiid still dealing with injuries at this time, including one where on a specific play, he literally goes up for a self-lob and just falls completely flat on his back for an injury in one of those games. It's insane how many times you'd see Joel Embiid put up these monster performances, yet they're always followed up by, especially in the late game scenarios, a bit of a dud on his end when he is healthy, and then just more health problems adding on, getting in his own way here. Whether it be, the amount of lower leg tears that have just consistently zapped his athleticism over the years. And even just some of the weirder things. The fact that this man, out of all conditions out there, randomly caught something that literally altered his ability to blink with both of his eyes. Like the amount of conditions and injuries that he has suffered at this point. It's like getting to a point where what the fuck are these injuries? Eventually finding out that one specifically was Bell's palsy. Like, there's always something with Joel Embiid. And it is an unfortunate situation to be in. But he's back now, and honestly, as long as he is there, they've got a chance. This should be a pretty interesting matchup between he and either of Mitchell Robinson and Karl Anthony Towns, although against Mitchell Robinson specifically, he did go on to do some pretty dirty things to him in that series as well. So I'm sure there's no love lost there, especially if you have Mitchell Robinson recently being fined $50,000 for his altercation with Dyson Daniels per Shams Charania. I'm sure that same mentality will be carried over when they're sharing the court with each other in this series. And that's really what it's going to take against Joel Embiid as well when you think about it. You need that big, burly force down low to keep him off the glass, because we know he will most certainly try. And that could serve to be a little bit easier with Karl Anthony Towns. He proved that, hey, when it comes down to the brass tacks, he can, if he has to be that kind of center and that kind of player in the post, he can do it. I just don't know if he is going to be truly built to deal with Embiid at his absolute peak. That could be displayed on pretty interesting ways. Of course, these guys have also had their own, rivalry, especially when Karl Anthony Towns was a Timberwolf. And I guess it makes sense with both of them being regarded as two of the best offensive big men in NBA history, just flat out. So this series could be something to determine who exactly gets to hold that mantle. Also, in that 2024 first round series, to just get off this, I have spent a lot of time talking about this, but it's fair play. The shit got crazy. I'm not gonna lie to you. Now, this series did not consist of Karl Anthony Towns, and of course, Dante DiVincenzo was still there. Julius Randle was not available, but they still had to, even in a 6-game series, it's not like they completely blew out the 76ers. Now, granted, although Joel Embiid did have a 50.8 rebound game at one point, it also took Tyrese Maxey going on an absolute heater late in the fourth quarter in Game 5 to take them to a victory in overtime, just to save their season. Jalen Brunson was, of course, electric in that series, per usual. So I'm sure the 76ers, with a roster that is a bit different from there. You don't have Tobias Harris anymore. You have some new additions to this squad. So these teams look, again, just a little bit different. This could be a fresh way to get a feel for how both of these rosters are. And from there, anything is fair game. In all seriousness, though, it should be a pretty interesting series. And at least the 76ers can say that, hey, they get a chance to continue writing the story and having their blend of young stars and also established ones in Joel Embiid attempt to get all the way to the promised land in a season where they may not have been expected by many to even get this far in the first place. Moving on to the Pistons and Magic yesterday. And for this game, the Magic still did not have Franz Wagner. So this was going to be tough, especially considering what I had already addressed in regards to that cursed game. It was in Detroit's home, of course, and as I'd expect, the second I call in the game, you just have it flooded with Pistons fans. Absolutely cheering their hearts out, trying to see their team do something that hadn't been done in 18 years in their organization, which is win a playoff series. And they were most certainly looking to get that task done after, in ways, having to battle back just to save their year. It is pretty much reminiscent of what the hell the Magic had to do in the play-in just to get in this spot. They put as much pressure on the Pistons as possible with a 3-1 lead. And staring down that kind of result in the imminent aftermath of it that could have been yielded if they were to have gotten eliminated in any one of the last 2 games, they warded all of that off. And they put themselves in this position in a bit of an advantage to ultimately give themselves a final shot at advancing to the second round and keeping their season intact. And it started in a pretty interesting way, to say the least. Because I'm not going to lie to you, there were some sloppy sequences early in this game. Considering that the game 6 actually did not have as many turnovers involved in it, it showed you that, hey, both teams were in this thing engaged and ready to go out there and play their asses off to win. That's how I would view that as. And if you're going to have that kind of effort throughout the entire game, you make it more difficult on the other team to get out to these large runs. Which is exactly how this was for at least the majority of this first half. It was just a back and forth game of runs, really. It's not like either team was going on these incredibly long stretches. And if they were, it seemed like each and every single other player on the roster opposite them had a bit of an answer here. You have to give Paolo Banchero a lot of credit because, hey, even with them trailing a bit earlier, it was Paolo Banchero who would quite literally factor into all of the first 11 points that the Magic picked up in this first quarter. All 11. And it's not like he was just continuing to go downhill the whole time, although it did end up working out for him later in the game. The man was legitimately taking jump shots from deep range, including one to beat the buzzer on an earlier possession. And he was making them at an efficient level. They had to burn one of their timeouts early because they simply could not stop what he was doing. But the most revealing stat line and all of that, because yes, after a 4 of 20 game from Paolo Banchero, seeing all those shots fall in, you can't imagine what that does for a player in that moment. You have to have short-term memory in regards to something like that. Even with me and other people out there constantly talking about that inefficient game. As the broadcast team kind of said it, as they got word from both rosters before the game with some comments and things like that, all of it would be forgotten if you do go out and you do win this Game 7. None of it matters. And Banchero was most certainly trying to make that statement when you are just cashing out that early and that efficiently. Oh, he most certainly was in the zone early in this game. And very rarely was he knocked out of it from that point forward. What was everybody else doing? You know, for all the talk we were saying about Cade and them and how those guys needed to step up to assist him in offensive production, I don't think we were ready for what happened in this one. Especially when you take this stat line into consideration. Before Jalen Suggs was able to break away for this layup that Banchero assisted to increase the lead a little bit at the 5-minute and 46-second mark, that would prove to be significant because it would be the first field goal not made by Paolo Banchero since the 11-minute 11-second mark of the third quarter of that cursed Game 6. So you're telling me in that game, 45 minutes without a made shot, period. And then in between the rest of that game and the start of this one, over the course of a couple days, you really could do that to them. You're not going to push it like that. Essentially, somewhere around 29 minutes of real game time without a made field goal by a player not named Paolo Banchero. And they were winning at this point through that. You be the judge of whether or not something like that is sustainable in a playoff game. Very quickly, the answer to that would be found. Because it did help as you did start to have guys like Dennis Jenkins and also Tobias Harris hit their shots well for this Detroit team as they briefly retook and then tied the ball game up. With Anthony Black crashing in for an LU dunk, they were able to briefly retake a lead at the end of the first quarter. And with the way that they were playing, limiting the Pistons' ability to make much of an impact on the interior early and continuing to have defenders swarming at them down low, it did keep them alive here. Then, goodness gracious. If this was not a legendary Paolo performance, I don't know where exactly this Magic team would have been at. I really don't. He was on the money all game long. He accounted for 11 more points in this second quarter, for crying out loud. Taking up hook shots, backing down, and taking on Cade Cunningham and making quality shots over him from a high percentage standpoint. He was attempting to go out there and carry this team as best as he could to victory. And yet still, with short lapses from elsewhere and some faulty defensive play, the Magic started to completely wither away by the end of the second quarter. Completely. And it was no secret at that point. Because for all the stuff that Paolo Banchero was doing in this second quarter, it wasn't going to mean much if Cade Cunningham was able to take advantage of easy looks with Wendell Carter Jr. completely out of position in the fast break. One of the better ways that the Pistons like to generate their offense, and not having to deal with all those defenders on the other side of the floor. Just ease right into it, walked right into it, and that was that. Leading to a timeout there. That still wouldn't even be the craziest thing for the Magic. They would get themselves a few good looks here with Desmond Bane proceeding to hit one of the few shots he did. As after this three-point field goal, it'd be a while before you heard him make another one or saw it. No, seriously. Paolo Banchero as well, for good measure, would add another bucket to the tally as they'd even the game up at 45 all. I mean, he was doing everything that he could do. Every single thing he possibly could do. As this was an 8-0 run at the time, And he also had 12 points. Yeah, 12 points in the second quarter. Like, he came to play. Well. One thing for Orlando, again, they started to get sloppier with the ball, knowing that this Pistons team is going to thrive on running in transition. You give up, at a certain point, 6 turnovers in the second quarter. And the Pistons, for a good amount of time, didn't even turn the ball over once. So, of course, their ability to get in and remain in the game was going to be pretty prevalent at that point. And then I mentioned the defense. Now, yes, in some situations, it was there, especially when you factor in Tobias Harris on one of the more random attempts you'll see. He actually did the same kind of double clutch thing that Jamal Shead attempted on Jared Allen at the end of Game 6 regulation for the Raptors-Cavs series. He actually made this one, then proceeded to space out to an open corner look for a three-pointer. On the very next possession, mind you. I don't know what it was, because we've heard bits and pieces of Tobias Harris. His proficiency in the post as a shooter there, how he can stretch the floor as a player. Clearly, the Magic must not have game planned too well on him. All this talk about Cade Cunningham needing help, well, it was right there the whole time. If you mean to tell me that in a playoff setting, a player who has traditionally been inconsistent in Tobias Harris, going back to his days with the 76ers, he proceeded to put up the most points he ever has in a playoff quarter, with 17 in the second quarter alone. And again, those corner shots, inexcusable. He hit one from the wing, uncontested, inexcusable. And in a moment's notice, he just was automatic after a while. I don't think anybody expected that from him, honestly. But hey, like he said, I guess, you know what? Essentially at that point, I'm right here. What's all this talk about? Oh, hey, get Cade Cunningham some help and Jalen Duren or Asar Thompson or so on. I'm right here, bro. I'm right here. I've been doing this the entire series. I was the second leading scorer in this thing for this team. You don't trust me to go out and make plays? Okay, I'll show you. And he did. And the Pistons, after having a 45 all tie, they went on a 20-6 overall run, combined with that, to close the second quarter. You'd been managing the game well up to that point, and then you give up a 20-6 run in the most gut-wrenching way possible. And it did not stop there. Not even remotely. Because once they felt this, they just did not get out of this rhythm. Not to mention that while Cade Cunningham was still finding his shots and getting to the basket, including putting one back up on Banchero to start out the third quarter with an offhand, like, you also had Pistons players step up and make their shots. Whether it was Duncan Robinson getting into the lane for drives. It's not even like he himself was making three-pointers. And also Dennis Jenkins coming off the bench, giving him some good change of pace. Not to mention Tobias Harris was still fucking hitting just because. Banchero as well remained to be the primary source of offense for this Magic team. And one could argue that, again, not having Wagner in this game as the true secondary scorer here may have hurt them tremendously. Yet still, you have quality guys out there in Desmond Bane, in Anthony Black, and Jalen Suggs, and they still are not even remotely efficient in this game. Despite Banchero literally summoning all of the effort he needed to try to get this team on the right track, This team put up a 15-point third quarter as a whole. One of the lowest that you could ask of them in a situation like this. So again, just rehashing the same notions of these poor second half performances, where even though the Pistons didn't have to do much in the third quarter themselves when it came to scoring, they did just enough to win outright against them. And the real gut punch in the whole equation came when Dennis Jenkins was able to get a fucking buzzer beater from the top of the key with Mike Breen on the call to end off the third quarter. That just ended up making things even worse for him. They went up by as much as like 20 in this third quarter on multiple occasions as well. With all those aforementioned players making an impact. Like, it was just, it's insane. Banchero, during this time, had 9 points in the quarter. Again, majority of the offense. While we're just wondering what everyone else is doing. It was ridiculous. And it just, yeah. The first 5 minutes in a situation like this matter. Now, this was a 19-point ball game entering the fourth quarter, and well, the first 5 minutes went about as you would expect, because this team continued to get sloppy with the basketball. They continued to allow this Pistons team to get right out in front of them over and over and over again. And these two three-pointers right here tell you everything you need to know about this, especially by the start of this fourth quarter. How is it that on back-to-back possessions for this Pistons team, and including one off of an offensive rebound, you give up 2 open three-point shots on the right corner of the court to Javonte Green as he literally just settles into the shot. He doesn't even rush it. Just rolls the ball up in his fucking target practice. Or Dennis Jenkins just sitting in the corner the whole time with no one within any range of him to make a good contest. And he just makes it easily. And they instantly call a timeout after that. Slee just kept growing and growing, and they reached a 25-point lead before we even got to the halfway mark of the fourth quarter as a team. With an 8-2 run in play as well. So it was just at a point, although it wasn't over, you've seen wilder things. You just got the feeling that this Magic team was just completely out of it. And I guess I'll get into that point a little later as well, especially with some of the stuff that's recently happened. The Magic did try to summon a last-ditch effort. They went on a 15-4 run, and they were full court pressing. The lead did diminish a lot, and the Pistons themselves at a point had like 7 turnovers in the fourth quarter when they were deploying that defense. So it was valiant to say the least. But what a convenient time to do it when you were already trailing by 25 points. Like, that is when you choose to start playing with more energy in the game. Like, what exactly am I missing here? Because if you retain that same kind of nature throughout the entire game, you wouldn't even have to be in this spot in the first place. And even the broadcast team brought it up on several occasions. When you will look back on this entire series, neither team played a full 48 minutes of consistent basketball at any one point in any one of these games. Yet, why did it feel like the Magic, when it came to these game-breaking runs, over and over and over again, especially later in the game, felt the brunt of the impact the most? And sure, they benefited from some of that with the Pistons getting sloppy and inefficient in their own way. But these big swings like this had the Pistons in this spot in the first place. And although they relented the lead a little bit, once Jalen Duren, who turned it around with a pretty solid performance on the glass and on defense, despite the numbers not necessarily displaying that. And Tobias Harris, again, continuing to reach new heights with something that he had never done. They ultimately won this game 116-94. As the Pistons would advance to the second round, and the Magic would be eliminated from the playoffs entirely. I'll do the Magic first because there are several points here to make. And it starts with Banchero, quite frankly. When you look at what he did in this game, he answered the call. He rose to the occasion. And this is the second Game 7 he's been a part of. Go back to 2024 when he faced off against he faced off against Cleveland, rather, and had a 38-point game there. In a series that actually had Jamal Mosley and J.B. Bickerstaff at the time facing off against each other. And here we were again. With Banchero this time putting up 38 points, 9 rebounds, and 6 assists, along with a block on 14 of 25 shooting with 4 threes. This made him, along with Doncic, the only two in NBA history with more than 35 points in their first 2 Game 7 appearances. And he also tied for the second most playoff games with 30 points in Orlando history, with 8 at the moment as of the recording of this video. So he brought his own, he brought everything to the table, really, when you phrase it like that. And I just, in a game like this, where you needed someone to step up, yes, Franz Wagner isn't there, anyone else could have taken this on. Bane, yes, you can see he had 3 3-pointers and 16 points in this game. He had just one 3-pointer in the second half. And knowing his ability to shoot, apparently, that's what you traded all that draft capital for in the first place. And you're relegating him to a 3-point make singular in the second half. Anthony Black and Jalen Suggs combined for 6 of 21 shooting and 0 of 8 from 3 for 17 total points. And then Wendell Carter Jr. was, for a guy who had been bullying Jalen Duren for most of the series, he was not effective in this game on either side of the ball. And hell, some of the lapses with open 3-point shots centered around him being the last line of defense somewhat, and still not even being anywhere close to the play in question. Like, no excuse with this team whatsoever. And even Banchero himself in a presser said, hey, at this state, they're not good enough as a team. They just aren't. One man goes down, and then the entire rest of your game plan gets fucked up. I guess it is worth saying in that regard, Wagner, when he was in, the team was up 3-1. And they still retain the series lead. The second he goes down and everything else flips, that means the entire rest of your team is so volatile when they are out there on the court that they cannot be trusted for a single second. How exactly is that possible, knowing what you've been attempting to build over the past few years? Unless the game plan for that It's completely screwed up on your part. All along. Because the identity of this team has not been consistent. Like, sure, you say you want to play through your defense. And where was it at in this game? Where was it at across these long runs in this second half? Poof. Out of there completely. Not even remotely close to efficient. There are no excuses when it comes to this. Even if Wagner was out, you had the lead. You had the 3-1 lead. You had the 24-point lead after the start of the third quarter in Game 6. And the broadcast team made it a good point when they got the quotes essentially saying that, hey, it is going to be a challenge for these players to overcome the second half performance in that game, with that still being fresh on their minds heading into this Game 7. They had to try. And at moments in this game, even with all that they had been doing early to keep it afloat, when those same kinds of issues are flaring up in the second half, when those same kinds of issues are flaring up in the third quarter, they clearly, in some way, shape, or form, lost that battle again in their minds. Clearly. Because it happened once more for them to lose by literally 22 points in this game. And they were there in the first. They were there in the fourth. Everything else in the middle was just completely tanked away. To the point where those margins in between the second and the third quarter overall, they account for 21 of the points here when you look at the margin of victory. By themselves. They could not play a full 48 minutes of efficient basketball to their style. And they allowed the same Pistons team, who also dealt with some of their own inconsistencies, to play stronger when it mattered to save their season. And just like that, they, in 2024, were first rounded by Cleveland. They were first rounded in one of the more forgettable series against the Celtics last season. And once more, they lose this after being up 3-1. And at that point, and I'll get to this in a second once I make this clear, because this was deja vu in every sense of the word. They had to make something happen. Because you're literally on the same trajectory each and every single season for 3 years now. And it is a what have you done for me lately league. You could have that same conversation about the Celtics, but at least they've accomplished something. The Magic haven't even come close. They gave themselves no choice but to, earlier this morning, per Shams Charania, fire Jamal Mosley after 3 seasons. Full out. And some of the other background that I already said to it is still relevant. I already said it in the Game 6 recap. You cannot have teams go through those kinds of momentum swings late in games with you being the head coach and not have some kind of repercussion take place. I don't care if the execution is that bad. It does matter. you also factor into that as the leading voice of that locker room. And when you hear about one of the things that Jalen Suggs was saying, again, the lack of clarity on defensive pick and roll coverages and stances in game 83 of the year, like, whoa, like, wait a minute. You would have to question, again, what is being said in the locker room? What exactly are you preparing these players for? Because to have that happen multiple times in this series, and then it happens again when you absolutely need to win, that just reflects poorly on the coaching at that point. Mosley is solid, but considering the outcomes of each and all of his 3 years with Orlando, although they have had solid regular seasons, they've just not gotten that far. And Mosley, with that, has not given himself that much leeway for this Magic team to truly invest in him for any more time, regardless of the talent that he may have as a coaching candidate. The results are just not there right now, not even remotely close. And it was revealing to have Banchero, one of your franchise guys, who is literally being paid a massive rookie contract extension as we speak, saying that about the team. And where does that all lead back to? That kind of comment right there. Coaching. So you can understand where they're coming from if they make that decision. Again, this is Mosley's second Game 7 he dealt with. Going back to Bickerstaff being on the Cleveland team that took him to 7 games in the 2024 first round, where they ultimately lost. And just think about this parallel as well also, because they mentioned this, and it's just craziness. The Pistons also faced off against the Magic in 2003, with Tracy McGrady still there. In the very same way, through the first 4 games, the Magic themselves held a 3-1 lead. In the very same fashion. And McGrady himself, at the time, called it. He just assumed that they were already set to be in the second round as a team. They thought it was easy. And the Pistons proceeded to come back in 7 games and beat them, forcing one of the earlier occurrences of a team coming back from a 3-1 deficit. And this also resulted in just another crazy parallel. Because who was the coach at the time? Oh yeah, it was Doc Rivers. In his 4th season with the team. Even though the 76ers might have ended the Doc Rivers curse thing, it never leaves you. You're in the same conversation with Doc Rivers. Again, Hall of Famer now, will be inducted in August. A man known for blowing 3-1 leads with teams. And you match that, if you're Jamal Mosley, with a guy who was in his early stage with the team. And in his first few years of coaching experience. To the same roster. Then, as I'm seeing here, that same Magic team the year after went 21-61 and missed the playoffs entirely before Doc Rivers was relieved of his duties and then went to Boston in 2004 full-time. Sure, that would not be the same parallel for Jamal Mosley here. But clearly, you were not going to go much of anywhere if you kept them here. And you most certainly didn't want a roster filled with that kind of talent to have to suffer in that way and waste some of the early seasons of players like Banchero and like Wagner. You can't risk that. You just can't. Mosley has been the head coach here since 2021. And an 189 and 221 record is decent at best, especially with what he's done since 2023 to have this team in 3 straight playoff appearances. But again, to get first rounded in each and every single one and not make an ounce of progress over any of them is crazy. It's wild. If you're going to settle for mediocrity, mediocrity is what you're going to get. What exactly are the Magic looking for here? Are you looking to get over the top? Are you looking to be consistent playoff contenders? Or are you trying to medal? You have to pick one, because doing all of this stuff in between is going to leave them exactly where they sit. At home, early, with nothing to show for one of their more successful seasons. Nothing to show for it at all. That is his nature as a coach, to play through his defense. And it hadn't even really been all that good for him to hang his hat on the approach in the first place. And it just got exposed left and right in this series. When they desperately needed stops, they couldn't get them. When they desperately needed to make their shots, they couldn't hit them. Not even remotely close. Just think about this for a second. Again, in all honesty, Mosley could still find himself in another position in time. But in a series that I said had to be won on the margins. All right? I made that point very clear when I previewed this in the first place, as I referred back to when talking about it in other recaps. Bruh, you cannot be in the Magic's position, okay, and have your team shoot just 32.8% from 3, while also, overall, even though the Pistons didn't shoot all that well from outside themselves, they shot just 4% worse from the field. And yes, that doesn't seem like a lot. Then you look at, again, the punches they took in these second halves, and that made all the difference. It's not about how you start a game. It's about how you finish. And through Mosley's entire time there, as I'd made the point several times, in this series alone, this became very clear. They're fucking front runners who can't even consistently do that right. You're front runners. When this Magic team is playing against weaker competition and they have a full head of steam, they're going to look like one of the best teams in the NBA. Then when they face off against one of the best teams in the NBA, they're going to get punched in the fucking mouth and dragged through the mud consistently. This is the same story that they've dealt with season after season after season. And even with some level of success, Jamal Mosley has not done enough, if anything at all, to elevate them to a new level as a team to be respected in this league. And people want to talk about, Paolo Banchero doesn't get the kind of respect that a former number 1 pick should deserve. Why do you think that is? Go look at how Cade Cunningham has risen up the ranks this season with JB Bickerstaff there. And then see the parallels here. which is one of the ways you could look at this series and define it as well. Go look at that. See how Bickerstaff has motivated this Pistons team to step up, and juxtapose that with Jamal Mosley. And you tell me who's more deserving to be in their spot right now. And the thing with this is Mosley apparently was on the hot seat for a while now. There were people even saying that, hey, even if he does win this series, he's going to be fired. That's how bad this was. People talking about, oh, Shams Charania had this in the draft for months on end. That's a very tough spot to be in as a coach. And it's nothing against him specifically, because in another setting, he could end up being really productive for another team. But all I'm going to say is this, and yes, it's J.B. Bickerstaff's second year there. Not to mention the kinds of purgatory, in a way. Not even purgatory, they were just flat out bad as a Pistons team before he got there. And he, again, has done nothing but elevate them from a season-to-season basis, even in a smaller sample size. The context is a little different, but you could not tell me that following a series like this, Bickerstaff would have been on the hot seat. You could not tell me that. And yet they were saying this from Mosley the whole time. They wouldn't even try this with J.B. Bickerstaff because there's a clear understanding of the kind of coach that he is. And of course, Bickerstaff in his spot has a little more experience with being a head coach. So again, in time, maybe this is the learning process for Jamal Mosley. But as it stands right now, we still don't know much about him. He himself still has to figure out the exact scheme he wants to focus on as we speak. Because even in trying to be that kind of tough team, even in trying to build that out, he still did not succeed at doing so. And then for the Pistons, to get into that side of things. You want to talk about deja vu? Not only did they come back from 3-1 to beat the Magic rather, in 2003, the very last playoff win they had also came against the Magic in 2008, 18 years ago. Just crushing the Magic fans' spirits, however many they had. Yeah, just completely crazy stuff. Goodness gracious, man. But no, this Pistons team, they played to their strengths. They slightly won on the glass. They were able to beat them in transition. And overall, in a game where they absolutely needed to hit their shots, even if players overall outside of Cunningham and Harris didn't put up the most gaudy numbers in scoring, they were making the most out of their field goal attempts. They shot, get this, 48.5% from three-point range in this game and made almost half of them on 33 attempts. Who the hell ever would have thought that the Pistons would do this? And again, in this same game, it was not even Duncan Robinson factoring into it. He made 2 of 10 of his three-point shots. No, it was everybody else. Cade Cunningham with 4, Tobias Harris with 5, and Dennis Jenkins with 4. They were that efficient from deep on top of being able to impose their physical dominance in the paint, on top of turning this team over, especially early, on several occasions. Like I promise you, without that fourth quarter there, the disparity in turnovers would have been very much in favor of Detroit. And it wouldn't have even been close. just a stellar performance from them, knowing they absolutely had to have it at some point. Cade Cunningham had 32 points and 12 assists in this game on 10 of 18 shooting with 4 threes, making him, throughout this game, along with Tobias Harris, the 10th pair of teammates to score 30-plus points each in a Game 7. He also became the second player in Pistons franchise history with 20 points and at least 10 assists in a Game 7 when Isaiah Thomas, who was there, along with some of the other Pistons legends, last did it all the way back in 1990. And yeah, just some historic performance from Cade Cunningham. And quite frankly, with everything running through him in this series, I suppose that it was a given at some point. Like, he'll literally end this series off averaging pretty much around 33 points a game, if I'm not mistaken. Like, and he got much cleaner with the turnovers there. Yeah, 32.4 points per, along with 7.1 assists. On 46% shooting from the field and 39.6% shooting from deep. But I guess the real story is that, hey, Tobias Harris most certainly had himself an anomaly of a performance. Over me. Yes. Capitalizing well off that 19-point second quarter. Again, the most he has had in a playoff quarter at all. He put up a 30-point, 9-rebound, near double-double with 3 steals on 11 of 18 shooting, those aforementioned 5 threes. When I say that it was the first time he did this, I mean it. Because for those who don't know, that this is actually Tobias Harris' second stint with Detroit. He was there in the mid-2010s, including in 2015-16. And he'd been a journeyman for a while up to this point. So he'd already been there one time. This is his second tenure with the squad. And this 30-point performance is the most he has ever had with them in the regular season or in the playoffs. The most he's also had in a Game 7. In multiple facets. He had never done something like this before. And especially with this team. And especially in the playoffs. And still, when the Pistons needed that consistent secondary scorer in this series, it was him. It was him. All along. Who would have possibly thought that? And he was just doing it to his style. It's not like he was necessarily accurate from three-point range the entire series, but just taking advantage of smaller defenders in the post and being so accurate and deadly with those shots to where teams had no idea how to really stop it. That benefited the Pistons a whole hell of a lot here. And I'm sure it's a performance that he absolutely will not forget either. The entire team won't. This is a team on the rise. And there have been conversations saying, hey, maybe they're 1 year early. Still, they get a playoff series win out of it for the first time in 18 years. They can't be content with that if they want to do more. And that fourth quarter performance in terms of turnovers with the lead on the line could be revealing for them, especially as they head into the next round. But again, they advanced. They survived this team, and frankly, just with absorb all of that contact. Literally being pinned to the ground in a way. And they rise back up as a unit. That city is still on cloud nine right now. You can only imagine for that team. Jalen Duren in this game also had 15 points and 15 boards on 5 of 9 shooting. Danish Jenkins again had 16 points on 5 of 8 shooting with 5 assists off the bench. They obviously advance as a top seed. They'd have to await and see who they'd be facing off against. And well, that is where we get into the very next game on the docket here between the Cavs and the Raptors. Also, yesterday. And then moving on to the Raptors and Cavs. And man, especially with the way things ended in Game 6, as I had already mentioned, like even with the road team not having won a game in this series up to this point, it was most certainly one. They mentioned as well that the margin of victory was literally deadlocked. Both teams had the same amount of points across the first 6 games in the series. So through and through, this was just purebred competition. And this game, again, would be to send one or the other to the second round. There is a very real chance for either team to win. And eventually, it became very clear who could pull it off. Now, the first portion of this game was fairly, and I mean fairly, back and forth. There were some small runs for the Raptors, including Jacoby Walter contributing to yet another 3-point shot in the last few games to go up 11-5 to start the game in the first quarter. But after a bit of some struggles in regards to protecting the basketball, the Cavs were able to settle down enough to start to make more of an impact later in the quarter, as Jarrett Allen especially became important. And they also started to hit more of their perimeter shots. Now, was that saying much? Not necessarily. They still weren't as efficient. But early in the game, at the very least, it kept them in the running for the rest of the game moving forward. They still had to solve the overall defensive issue because Scotty Barnes, when he was in the game, was still being an absolute hound to both Donovan Mitchell and James Harden, making everyone else's job a little bit easier in regards to handling their own individual assignments. And they still had to find a way to overcome that in order to win the game. The thing with that is, the Raptors themselves, when it came to 1, fouling, and 2, their own stretches of just inefficient shooting, the Cavs were able to deal it back in the second quarter and return the favor a little bit. It was deadlocked by halftime, essentially, with all those things in mind. Because while they would occasionally get the right stuff done on offense, they did not have a consistent ability to produce those open looks. And when they did, they could not have their shots fall down consistently enough. You had them go on a stretch where there were just a number of different misses in a row as the paint started to shorten up. They were forced to shoot 3-point shots at that point because the Cavs, with the way that Jarrett Allen and Evan Mobley would come to play down low, they were going to need that defensive presence. And in ways, they exercised that to a T. So again, while you had some shots occasionally fall down, for Toronto, they still were not that efficient from range to really be respected as an overall roster. And so you would have the Cavs kind of work their way back into it with their own three-point creation and with their own ability to just end possessions and also extend them through their own rebounding prowess. And man, when you hear about the difference in rebounds in this game, it is going to absolutely blow your mind. Because in a game that was relatively close, having those extra possessions and having the ability to convert on those extra possessions at such a high level in a series like this, that made all the difference. Scotty Barnes himself was still doing relatively well as a scorer. Very quickly, though, in the second quarter, near the end of it, he got in deep foul trouble, already being at 3.5. And I'm thinking to myself, they have gotten some good defensive effort from everyone, but you can tell that this offense runs through Scotty Barnes. And it all goes back to the question that I asked in the preview of this. It all goes back to some of the things that I've been stating earlier in the series in the games that I hadn't been able to watch before, with those being behind paywalls or things of that nature. If this offense is not being run through Scotty Barnes as a playmaker or as another role here, if there is another one being filled by Scotty Barnes on any one possession, who is the next man up that can do it for Toronto? Yes, Walter himself has been a revelation as a shooter, especially in catch-and-shoot situations. Yes, R.J. Barrett has been another presence at times to take the team on runs himself, going downhill for shots. And they did benefit at times when they drew matchups specifically on the two defensive liabilities on Cleveland rather. When those guys were lined up against them, they just cooked and worked Harden and Mitchell down low. When it was concentrated by other players of Mosley and Allen's repertoire, they did not have much of a counter to that. So they needed to figure out, hey, who else could do it? And they did not want to know the answer. So they'd have to try to ask Scotty Barnes to do a little less. Crazily enough, he could not play with that same kind of just reckless nature. Not to say that he's a reckless defender. Like, he's got tremendous basketball IQ, but he could not play as loose. That's a better way to say it, on defense. Because, believe me, when Scotty Barnes is roaming all over the court with the ability to cover damn near every position, that is when the Raptors team is at their absolute best. And they knew it heading into the second half, as this game was evened up at 49-all. They knew that. But with having those kinds of issues take place already, and with the Raptors holding a 14-5 advantage in points off of turnovers at a point in this game early, it could get very interesting if they were to have to turn that level of effort down just even a little bit. And it started to happen in the second quarter. There was an 11-2 run by the Cavs to end it and tie the game at halftime. And it just was the perfect recipe for disaster. They were already trending upward as a team, and the Raptors were still trying to figure out a true path into the next portion of this game from there. Cavs just blitzed them in the third quarter. And this would be the ultimate separator. They went on runs of 11-1 to open, and then 14-3 after there was a challenge or a slew of challenges actually, with one where Colin Murray Boyles was allegedly fouled, and one where he himself actually tried to hinder and restrict Jared Allen's ability to finish out in transition on one of the possessions. Oh, but don't worry, Jared Allen, after hitting those free throws, would be able to literally, nearly from the free throw line, just absolutely take one from there and jam it in with one hand. If the tides were already turning or starting to at the end of the second quarter, they completely flipped. And a lot of the credit there, especially after this game was so close in the first place, goes to Jared Allen. Because over the course of this run, over the course of this third quarter, he was one of the largest reasons why they were able to control the glass at a high pace. Like, they had the graphic at a certain point. He was at 9 points, 5 rebounds, and 2 blocks. When they first got this man from Brooklyn as a part of that multi-team trade that sent Harden there to the Nets, of course, in that failed experiment of a team. Yeah, crazy how things work out, because now James Harden and him are teammates. When you think about it that way, that is crazy to consider. I digress. He was a true blue two-way center in that moment. And he was known more for his defense, especially coming from Brooklyn in the first place. And for a player who had consistently been dealing with the narrative that he had not been a good playoff performer, to the point where, hey, the lights were brighter than expected, right? No, he rose to the moment and put up nearly a double-double in the third quarter alone, and also had 14 points. And that kind of effort from those big men who were going to have the advantage over the likes of Sandro Mamukelashvili and Jakob Poeltl anyways. Because Poeltl as well, he played, but to be honest, in terms of big men, you could say Mamukelashvili had more of an impact in the overall series. You could say that Colin Murray Boyles had more of an impact in the overall series. As long as Mobley and Allen were doing their part, they were going to be okay. And in this game, when they absolutely needed it, Jared Allen played his ass off. And there was nothing that they could do about it. Like, you literally get a possession where he's dealing with both A.J. Lawson and Colin Murray Boyles coming in, trying to get layups at the summit against him, and he rejects the both of them, ending the possession right then and there as they walk right back down the court and put up an easy shot for themselves. The little things right there were starting to work out so well for Cleveland. And ultimately, by the end of this quarter, they held a lead as large as 19 and finished with that because Jared Allen promptly put back a shot for a layup on the offensive glass. And man, from there, it was just something where I didn't have to take my notes. I thought that the Raptors could do a little more there. But by a point, hell, with him doing that, the second chance points disparity just grew for this Cleveland team. And I don't know if it would be fully tracked here with the box score I have on Fox Sports, but with that in mind, it was essentially a 22-6 advantage for the Cavs in second chance opportunities at the end of the third quarter. Just like that, it was a wrap. And the Raptors put up a very offensive-centric fourth quarter. It still didn't come without its fair share of miscues to make things easier for the Cavs, as Donovan Mitchell and James Harden, while they themselves might not have been the overall catalyst, they played fairly well enough to keep this team together. And with the lead already intact, the job was much easier on those two. All the burden would be cast on them if they were to have been in a closer matchup here. But they didn't have to do as much with other players stepping up alongside them in massive ways. And ultimately leading this Cavs team to a 114-102 win to come out with the series. Scotty Barnes also, again, it's tough. Because at times those runs occurred when he was on the court. So knowing that he was also in foul trouble, he would reach 5 in this game. Had to sit down, and even he's like, he can't believe some of the calls. He is obviously a person wanting to compete in a situation like that and help his team out. So he doesn't want to be relegated to the bench either. That was just the flow of the game. The Cavs completely ran away with it late. To just talk about the Raptors here, knowing that their season's done now, man, they had a lot on the line in regards to this being their first series win since 2020. Yeah, that's just tough, especially with the way that this team played facing an 0-2 deficit initially. They played inspired basketball in this series. As far as this game goes, though, to shoot 28.6% from 3 was just their death knell. In the games that they'd won, they, by nature, had to be just a little more efficient, aside from Game 4. And that's how the Cavs ended up coming away with this one. Unfortunately for the Raptors here, as good of a team as they are defensively in this game and in others in this series, it came down to the Cavs incorporating their style of play on the imprint of this series. And the Raptors, they had to play to that pace. They did not have much to respond with on their end. The effort from their young guys, overall, being one of the younger teams in the playoffs overall at around 26 years old, they tried their best and met an absolute match in this regular season finale, as it would come to be. I don't know that this team was expected to really go that far this season. So it'd be remiss of me to say, hey, they're just going to completely blow things up and try to see if they can add a better piece to the roster to take that next step forward as a team. I think they're one of those, as I've been saying, that are going to really trust the process of development and try to give this thing at least another season. Consider that Manuel Quickly, who would have probably been an even more important player in this series, especially from three-point range, knowing his capability when he was a Knick as being a very hot shooter at times for that roster, to win them some key ball games in the playoffs. And his reputation as well to be a quality playmaker at times, especially growing into that with this Raptors team. He had not played a single game in the series. And they did also have Brandon Ingram out. Those aren't excuses, but from their standpoint, it's like, it's a tough loss if we have both of those guys. If we're at full strength, man, we probably had an opportunity to have those two players in to give us the outright advantage here. And it still came down to Game 7. It still came down to that. So, I mean, like, is that really the worst outcome for our season? Not quite. Not quite. They've still got room to grow as an overall roster. And in ways, they've now started to find some of their own pieces to sustain that success next year. Because the Raptors, when you think about it, and these so-called big men, they weirdly drafted Jonathan Mobo from San Francisco, standing at 6'7", in the NBA draft in 2024. Tried to give him a shot. That didn't pan out. He's not in the rotation. Grady Dick, of course, was not in the rotation this playoff run. You could argue that Colin Murray Boyles, who was also an undersized big from last year's draft, and Jacoby Walter, in ways have started to gain more trust, more and more trust from Darko Rajakovic since the All-Star break. In a playoff setting like this for Murray Boyles, a rookie, mind you, overall in this series, played exceptionally well. And has become, I would think, a legitimate rotational piece to have on this team. So they're still trying to fill out this roster. They're starting to find a bit of juice here from some of their players. And the best thing that they can do this offseason is look to add to that. Some of it could come through the draft, some of it could come in free agency. But for the most part, you're probably not going to completely dismantle this roster. I'm sure that some players will move. If they are adding to the youth movement with players that actually show some promise, they're on the fast track to at least being able to sustain quality play for a good amount of time. I think that's where they would want to find themselves as a team. And then, overall for Cleveland, biggest advantage here, 60 total rebounds and 20 offensive boards compared to just 33 for the Raptors. You think about this, the Raptors themselves, especially in the games that they won, benefited mightily from the offensive rebounds. We talked about it especially in Game 4. And Cleveland, with a season on the line, returned the favor. Everybody was in there playing solid defense, including fucking Max Strus on Scotty Barnes, being able to rip him on an occasion and crashing into the painted area for rebounds. Jalen Tyson had 9 rebounds off the bench. Max Strus had 8. And the outright leader of the pack here, none other than Jarrett Allen. Completely rewriting the narrative about himself in playoff settings. Because if his third quarter wasn't enough overall, he finished this game with 22 points and 19 rebounds, along with 3 blocks. With the 19 rebounds and the 8 offensive rebounds being Game 7 records in Cavs history, on 7 of 11 shooting from the field. Jarrett Allen had had a fairly quiet series for a while. It does not matter that much when you come out and you perform like that with the season on the line. As was said already. And Allen applied that pretty much as well as anybody across this entire slate of games. As well as anyone. And the Cavs, moving forward, they're going to need that kind of work overall. To get that from just Jarrett Allen is crazy. Evan Mobley himself was pretty efficient from the field and also had 7 rebounds on 5 of 7 shooting for 13 points. James Harden had 18 points and did struggle from the field, got to the free throw line mostly, and had 6 rebounds and 3 assists. Donovan Mitchell himself had 22 points on 9 of 20 shooting. By no means great games for them. But if you're going to have other players step up and hit their shots like Sam Merrill was able to from three-point range to stave off early runs from Toronto, and you're going to have that kind of hustle from Max Strus of all people on defense, again, it lightens the load that they have to take on as players, knowing that they are superstar caliber guys. So it's a tough out for the Raptors, but by no means a wasted season. This could, if they approach it right, just be the next step in their overall development as a team. And I think that's where they are probably headed now, as they still trying to seek some form of playoff success for the first time in a few years. And as for Cleveland, they advance with their win. They will be the team facing off against the Pistons on Tuesday, tomorrow. With that series, honestly, considering that the Pistons were going to get the draw once they won it, out of either of those teams, you're getting a similar series there in all respect. The Cavs are probably a bit better of an offense. And so the Pistons, with some of the lapses they had in that series against the Magic, the Cavs, when they are on their A game, are going to be a far more efficient ball club on offense. Far greater. You can't get away with too many of those mistakes against them. And if they can force them to be backed into a corner, well, it's said that the Cavs have a much weaker defense. So any number of things is possible there. In a series like that, I'd expect guys like Jalen Tyson and Ron Holland II for Detroit to play a little bit more, knowing that, especially with having such ball handlers like James Harden and Cade Cunningham and Donovan Mitchell playing in the series, you're going to want guys who can keep up with them quickly in a lateral sense. Like, I'm sure that, for example, as well, when it comes to the big men, you'll have Tobias Harris, probably on Evan Mobley or something like that. That could be an interesting component as well. Jarrett Allen saved them in this series, and Evan Mobley had some solid performances. How exactly are they going to deploy him against the likes of that Detroit defense? And does Detroit, with a potential adjustment there, do they choose to keep Tobias Harris as a starter? Maybe you do with his offense in mind. Do you give Isaiah Stewart more minutes in the rotation, knowing how good of a defender that he is, and line him up against Evan Mobley? Interesting questions to think about right now. Of course, that game is tomorrow, so they're going to have enough time to draw it up. And, hey, another thing that people could say here, JB Bickerstaff has a chance to not only take this Pistons team to a fucking conference championship game when they were literally one of the worst teams in the NBA in 2023, just less than the full 3 years ago. And now they're on this path. He also gets a chance to potentially exact revenge against this Cleveland team, who fired him as a result of his seemingly stagnant tenure with that roster. And that is an overall conversation as well to be had about this series. It was really dangerous for the Cavs, knowing that that had been the narrative surrounding them, and that you get James Harden in this, You fear of his Game 7 performance, and granted it wasn't elite. You win it though. And you fight to see another day. They're still searching for that kind of championship contention right now. And they still have another daunting obstacle in their way before they get there. So at that point, it's like, even in a series where the Pistons would probably be expected to win as a 1 seed, they, in the grand scheme of things, might still not have a lot to lose. You don't want to get upset by this Cavs team. At the same time, this is the first taste of true playoff experience that they've had in a while as an organization, let alone with this tenure. And so, in that regard, in the same way that they want to talk about it with the Pistons, when the going gets tough against a more experienced, veteran Cavs team, what will they do in those moments? They did get the edge against the Magic. They're a younger team with, yes, playoff experience, but not necessarily coming into it as an elite team. And now you have one in a Cavs roster that had been, before we even get into this Raptors series, one of the hottest in the NBA after the James Harden trade. So it's going to be important to slow them down. Should be a hell of a series, though. And just like that, the next round is set. As per the first round and this video, that'll do it. I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.